The third and final preview for the Ashes Ascendancy Natural Magic expansion has dropped, and this is the final preview for the Phoenixborn cards, which are the player cards. So let's get into them. So welcome back Ashes players, the preview season continues, rounding out the Phoenixborn decks for Maeve and Kana. The first card we have is Propagate. This is a reaction spell, and this costs a frog to use, which is the animal side of the nature dice. And you can play this spell after a conjuration you control is destroyed. Place up to 2 Snapseed conjurations onto your battlefield. So this is quite interesting because the ready spell to summon the Snapseeds, it naturally costs 1 leaf to play, and it only gives you 1 Snapseed unless it is charged, in which case it gives you 2. So you get the same number of Snapseeds for the same number of dice as long as the ready spell is charged, but this doesn't require anything to be charged, it just requires a conjuration you control to be destroyed. The other benefit of this is that it doesn't require a spell slot in your spell board, so if your Phoenixborn only has 3 spell slots, you can use one of them to just give you more options, as opposed to the summon Snapseeds, which you might only want 1 or 2 of, and that would consume the entirety of that spellboard slot. So this could actually be a better option to get the Snapseeds out than the ready spell, in my opinion. So that's going to be quite interesting to play around with. The second card we have is Encircle. Action spell. This card is cost a main action and a leaf. Deal damage to target unit and opponent controls equal to the number of unexhausted conjurations you control. So that's pretty important. You can't just bum rush them with your conjurations and then deal the damage, but that's kind of really powerful depending on which Phoenixborn you're playing and how you're summoning your conjurations. There's a lot of Phoenixborn decks where you're just like, I just want to have a bunch of conjurations out. Most notably, of course, is a Summon Fallen deck, which can get out 3 conjurations at once, so that's going to be kind of scary considering it only costs 1 leaf. And this is also a pretty basic spell that isn't really exclusive to Maeve, considering her deck. You can easily put this inside of Kana's deck as well. So, it says, support your guardian conjurations with 2 powerful natural magic spells. Propagate ensures that even amidst your opponent's pruning efforts, you'll still have plenty of seeds in the ground waiting to sprout. And once they do, encircle enemy units with your array of conjurations to take a decisive knockout. As they say, the bigger your crop, the harder they'll drop. I don't think they say that, but that's a fun saying to add to my lexicon. So, next up, we have Aspiring Growth. This is an alteration spell that costs a leaf and a main action to play, and this spell can only be attached to a unit with an attack value of 1 or less. And it gives that unit +2 attack and +1 life. That's not that great for a leaf, that's pretty good stats, but since you can only attach it to a unit with an attack value of 1 or less, that means that at most that unit will have 3 attack after attaching this. You can obviously buff their attack afterwards, but still. That's not the best in the world, but it's worth using in my opinion. It's kind of just like a worse Massive Growth, except this sticks around unlike Massive Growth. And then the second alteration spell, there's lots of alteration spells now, is a Shock Gauntlet. Attaches to a unit, costs a side action and a gear. When attaching the spell to a unit you control, you may move an artifice die from another card you control onto the attached unit. If you do, you may deal 1 damage to target unit and opponent control. So for a gear, you can move a artifice dice onto this unit and it gives them +1 attack. We're seeing a lot of moving dice around with Maeve's cards as opposed to just placing the dice onto cards, unlike Issa Brightmore's original deck, but that makes sense because you only have 5 gears in this deck as opposed to the 10 gears that you have in Issa's, so it makes more sense that you have to move them around after placing them than it does to just keep placing them down. Overall, I kind of just view this as a sort of pseudo fire alteration, except that it helps move dice around. So that gives you more synergy as opposed to the fire alteration, which is just damage. Maeve's 2 alteration spells in her kit power up otherwise unassuming units. Aspiring Growth can turn even the smallest conjurations into a considerable force, while Shock Gauntlet rewards playing elaborate systems of charged artifice dice for an explosion of power. And it should also be noted that Aspiring Growth can also work in Kana's deck, although this is not a action spell. This is a red alteration spell, I should say. So that doesn't, you can't search for it, but it is plausible to use it in Kana's deck. So we move on to Kana's remaining cards, which there's only 2 of, the Summon Storm Spirit and the Storm Spirit. So for the ready spell, that just costs an action to play, and it costs a main action, exhausting this, and a moon to place a Storm Spirit conjuration onto your battlefield, and it has focus 1, so if you have a second copy of Summon Storm Spirit on your spell board, If you control a card with an astral die on it, you may change the activation cost of this spell to a side action, exhaust, and a basic dice. The changing the cost to a basic dice instead of a moon doesn't really matter that much in my opinion, but the side action from a main action cost is a little bit more significant because that means that you can now play a creature with your side action and then attack immediately, and the opponent doesn't have a chance to get rid of it unless they use a reaction spell, so that's kind of nice. As for the Storm Spirit itself, it is just a 1/1/0 with Hex 1. When this unit comes into play, you may lower 1 dice and target opponent's active pool 1 level. So there's a lot of cards that do this, conjurations that just lower dice when they come into play or when they die or something like that. And this isn't anything significant. I think that the benefit really is just from the ability to play it as a side action. Most notably, when you do play it as a side action, you can lower an opponent's dice, which means that if they only have the 1 dice that they need to play a reaction spell when you attack or something like that, you can lower it from a frog to a leaf, and now all of a sudden they can't use that dice, and therefore you have shut down that reaction for that turn. So you can do some cool stuff with this. Kana has 1 pair of cards left in her arsenal. The Conjuration plays directly into her Disruptive Swarm playstyle, knocking down your opponent's dice to keep them off balance. Additionally, if the skies are on your side and Kana is airborne, that's a weird way to put that. I wouldn't phrase it that way, but whatever. Storm Spirits can be summoned as a high-speed threat. Storm Spirits may be small, but their 1,000 cuts approach is sure to leave your opponents wondering where things went wrong. Next week, we will see the end of previews as our... Wow, the end of previews next week as our second ever Dragonborn descends from the skies in pursuit of the blasphemous Phoenixborn. Look for Phoenixborn Natural Magic expansion in retail stores and the Plaid Hat Game Store web store Q2 of 2026. I was not aware that next week is going to be the last preview. I wonder if that means that we're going to get the entire set of Dragonborn cards revealed next week, or if they're just going to show off a little bit of it, and then that's going to be sort of the mystery of what's coming, right? Like, they're going to be trying to leave something unshown. I hope they show everything, because that's what they've done before, and I would like to go over my thoughts of it, first impressions, based on what we see on how it is better than Skasa Kalani, because basically anything is better than Skasa Kalani. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see. So hopefully I'll see you next week when we go over the Dragonborn cards. Goodbye.